All right, let's see. Is this thing working? Try doing an introduction 15 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, and I forgot my mic. I probably ought to have that little audio thing on. Can we turn that on right now? Settings, alerts, volume alert. There we go. I don't know that that's going to do it, but we'll try. Check 1, 2. Well, we've got volume now, so we're not worried about that. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. It helps when you turn it on. Yes, that's the trick. That's the trick. So welcome, Dave and Michael, Jesper, Ken, holy cow, Gunner, Eric. Eric's going to be in, got a text from El Spouso. Let's make sure that we're not missing anything we should. Check. Cool. All right, we probably ought to put this on mute. We figured out how to do some of this stuff. Do I speak Spanish also? I know a few Spanish words. How about that? And I grew up learning French, and then had Spanish in college, and so I speak words, but I'm not always sure what language they are. So, yeah, we'll see. We will see. It just, it's just phrases I picked up here and there. Although I am heading to Portugal next month, so I've got to learn some Portuguese between now and then. And my brother, my middle brother, invited me and my baby brother and spouses to go with them to Portugal. And they said they would supply most of the housing. I'm like, wow, okay. So he said, just get yourself over here and bring something to eat so we can do that. And he's got us, he just got a note yesterday that they've rented a palace. Apparently it turned into a hotel. And so we've got a palace for a couple days. We have a manor, a 7-room manor out in the countryside. Apparently it's a little on hard times, so we'll see what it is. You just never know until you get there. But that's all right. I'm up for an adventure. Always up for an adventure. Had an adventure 2 weeks ago, 4th of July. My 3 boys and their 4 kids and spouses, and Sandy and I were down in St. Petersburg, Florida, actually Indian Rocks Beach. Had a little house down there, about a 10-minute walk from the water, and just had a ball. Ate too much, stayed up too late, had too much fun. It was great. It was great. All right, Michael says, Portugal's great, fantastic. I guess I could put some of this stuff up here. We have the technology for that. Golly gee. Seafood cheap and tasty. Well, I'm looking forward to seafood. Yeah. Yeah, we'll be in Lisbon for some of the time and Porto for some of the time, and then in the countryside for some of the time. Working on 5 systems. Holy cow. Dave, are you building them or are you working remotely on them at the same time? That's right. Concentrate. Don't pay attention to this stuff. All right, so we probably should get started. We have a button for that, or we used to have a button for that. Where is our button for that? Okay, all my stuff is all messed up. Let's see. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's not it. What about there? That should be it. Nope, that's not it either. There we go. There we go. Nope, 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 that's not it either. Holy cow. There we go. There we go. All right, let's get started. Yes. Welcome back. I've missed you guys. It's been I was on a vacation. And then last week, I was just, my brain was somewhere else. I'll tell you where it is. Dave is fixing 5 systems. I'm building 7 systems. So it's got me moving, and is the, kind of the feature of today's show, which was, I asked Dave, I was like, Dave, when you guys do these things, do you clone them? They're like, yes, we clone them. I have been building, for 10 years, I've been building every system from scratch, installing Windows, loading drivers, installing vMix, all the other stuff that goes along with it on each individual system. Now, I did get to know each system really well in the process, but there's a simpler way. At least there has been. Now, I've got it up behind me right here. And we'll take a look at it in just a second. And typically, I'll build a system with a vMix system with a 250 gigabyte solid state M.2, and then a terabyte solid state M.2 as a data drive. So all the operating systems, software, etc., on the C drive, and then the D drive, or whatever it gets lettered, ends up being the storage drive. And what I found is, or I've been thinking about this for years. Tom, if you could just clone it, you could save so much time and energy. And I was concerned about cloning Windows and all these other things. Didn't try it. I was just concerned about it. And so last week I said, I'm just going to try this and see what happens. Well, the first couple attempts went really, really well. I was able to clone it. Didn't have Windows activated. Didn't have vMix activated. So it was just sort of loaded but dumb. And then I thought, I'll go ahead and put the vMix license key on that specific unit. I'll go ahead and put the Windows registration key on that specific unit. But I've got a clone set up behind me that is a little bit of a hybrid, in that I accidentally, forgetting I wanted to do this today, I went ahead and activated Windows. So this is a Windows activated copy, and we'll see what happens. I tried to clone another one that had a Windows activated copy on it, and it wouldn't clone properly. And it didn't work. When I made it the main drive, it just said, automatic repair attempt. So we'll see. So let's give this a shot, and I'm gonna switch over to this shot for just a second. This is the screen behind me, and yeah, let's get that off. And so what I've got, in fact, let me go ahead and just restart this so you can see the whole thing. And I'm just gonna turn the machine off, and then we'll turn it back on. And I'm gonna boot it into the BIOS so that we can go. I don't know. Can you see where my finger is? No. Anyway, right down there is a USB drive that has something called CloneZilla on it, and we are going to boot from that drive. So let's go to the boot directory, and we'll go there. So now we're going to boot from that, and this is it. And so we are going to, I don't know if you can see that little guy right there, kind of in magenta, and we'll just hit the the enter key to accept that. And it's basically a command line type deal, but it's got, is that out of focus? Yeah, it's out of focus again. It seems to be hunting on the focus. Let me turn off, just sort of get to what's good focus, and we'll turn it off. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, we'll leave that there. All right, so we're going to take English just by hitting the enter key. And then we're going to keep the keyboard default layout. Yes, that's the one in red there, so we'll say OK. Now it does the command line thing and comes back to another screen, and it says Start CloneZilla. So we're going to start that. And it's going to say, we've got several choices here. I can cursor up and down. And the one I want is device to device, that is drive to drive. So we'll take that one, and it's going to do some other things. And we're going to use the expert mode. No, we're going to use the beginner mode because I am a beginner. We're going to use disk to local disk. Yes, that's what we want. And now it's going to say, okay, which local disk do you want? Well, I've got 2 drives that are the same size, which means I can't really tell them apart, except that the serial numbers are different. And I guess if I looked at the serial numbers on the drives, I could tell you that. But I do know that the 0 is my main drive, so we'll take that one. And then the 1, NVMe 1 and 1 is the second one. And I'm going to, let's just interactively check and repair source file before cloning if needed, and then we will use the partition table from the source drive, and we'll log files, and we will choose what to happen when we're done. And so now down at the very bottom, you can't see it, but down at the very bottom it says press enter to continue. We're going to do that, and then it says yes or no, and I'm going to say yes, and do you want to continue, yes or no, and I'll say yes again. So now it's going to go about its business. And this process will take about, really only about 5 minutes if it works. And occasionally there'll be some text here in yellow to indicate, hey, there was a problem. So that's what we're going to kind of keep an eye out for here. Obviously there's lots of text to see, but the fact that they've, okay, so we're cloning the first part, whatever the part is that we're cloning, probably a partition. Cloned successfully. Okay, that's what it says down at the bottom. Now we're cloning another partition. This looks like the restore partition because it's got restore in it right there. Cloned successfully. Now we're going to, let's see, starting to back up device to device. I guess this is sort of the balance of what needs to be cloned. And again, it moves along pretty quickly. And so I've taken, this is one that I did the other day. I've taken a drive and I just marked it as a master, and I'll just keep it. And, you know, I guess if I make some changes, I'll make another master. The idea is that I would take this and make a copy of it and then use the copy in the PC. And if the copy if I end up doing something with the copy that is an improvement on this master, then I'll just clone that one to this one. And I'm assuming you can clone, you know, a clone is an exact copy. Why should it be different? Let's see. Okay, we're going back over here, and we have we've cloned something successfully, and everything looks good so far. I haven't seen any warnings or any unsuccessfully or failed messages as I was getting before. So this is good. So maybe the Windows activation doesn't mean anything here. Everything's done. Remember to power off. Press enter to continue. So we're done. Okay. We are done. We are done, 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 done. That's great. So we've got a choice of power off or reboot. We're going to power off so that we can pull the drive out of this. Now this is a system that I'm building for a customer. I got the drive the way I wanted it in terms of a kind of a master, and I duplicated it. So we'll pull this one out, and it's just sitting in there in the M.2 slot. And we'll take that little guy out. And so now I have a master. Master general. Master general. It's a general master. It's just a regular master. So that's pretty cool. So I've built 5 systems, but 3 of them have cloned main drives. And then I activated Windows, and I will activate vMix. Haven't done it yet. But so far, it's great. Now, I did have one drive that didn't cooperate, and I think it may have been just simply a bad SSD. And so I'm going to, at some point, I'll put that here in my main machine and do a disk check on it, and may just have to send it back and get a replacement for it. But, you know, what is a, you know, this is a 250 gig Samsung NVMe M.2 SSD. And this is what, 60 bucks, 70 bucks? And I thought, wow, you know, if I can save, it was probably taking me an hour and a half to load each system from a blank DVD to load the OS and everything else. And now I can just make a copy of it. Now, what I realized that's different, so if you guys are doing this, a couple things I've discovered along the way is, of course, if part of my standard operating procedure is to do a firmware update on the motherboard. And so you can't clone, I found out you can't clone that as part of the drive. It doesn't work. But I've got all that software on a USB drive here, so I can get to it pretty quickly. It does install the drivers for anything else. It won't do the update to the motherboard, but I can install all the motherboard drivers on that drive, and then I don't have to do that when I take the clone and make it a main drive for another system. What else have I discovered along the way? That it really is cool. I don't know why I waited so long. Now, let me grab the drive here. This little guy starts out with a piece of software called Rufus, R-U-F-U-S. And there's, if you Google Rufus, it'll pop right up. And Rufus is what allows this drive to have the ability to boot. And then CloneZilla is the nominated software to use on this. And basically, I just turn the system off, and when it turns back on, I tell BIOS to boot to this drive, and then it's, as you can see, it's scripted, but it's essentially a command line performance at that point. Hey, Otis. Otis says he used Samsung Magician to clone. And yeah, I haven't tried that. That would be interesting. Wendy asks, can you clone an existing to upgrade the OS drive size? Yes, you can do that. And you want to read through the documentation. Again, I'm using CloneZilla. there's some great YouTube videos out there on that, although some of them leave out steps, which I found out as I was trying to do it. It's like, oh, how did he get from here to here? Because there's a step in between that he left out. And by watching more than one video, I was able to get those figured out. But yeah, there's a way to basically tell CloneZilla to expand and take the full drive, so that you don't have to go back and expand a partition later. It'll do that as it's cloning. But Michael Quist, it seems to work fine cloning the OS. I'll find out with this. This says master, but it really is the clone copy of what's on that machine. And it has a what would you call it? Activated Windows on here. So I need to change the Windows key on every subsequent drive. And at some point, I'll probably redo this and not have an activated copy of Windows on here. So we'll see. But yeah, in fact, we'll go ahead and fire up this guy right now. Although this is the main, this is the drive we made a copy of. So that's the copy over there. Other thing that I love is I've got a start button, and it just hooks right up to the motherboard. And it's so easy to just press this button and not have to worry about trying to jump a couple of pins there. And we'll let that guy do its thing. Did it come on? Yeah, it came on. So it's just going to fire up in the background. Yeah, there we go. And boots pretty quickly. Probably won't now that I've said that. There we go. And, oh, you know what? I didn't activate Windows on that one. I didn't, so I'm in good shape. I'm in good shape. So this copy doesn't have activated Windows on it. Doesn't have activated, what would you call, vMix. Why am I out of focus? There we go. I was out of the focus, little dot in the middle, I guess. So I can make more copies of this, and then I activate vMix and activate Windows. The only thing that really would force me to change this one now is if, you know, something that I'm loading in there somehow gets changed. I mean, this drive has Google Chrome already installed on it, so that might have to be updated if this goes on too long. You know, the motherboard manufacturer may release a new BIOS. Well, the BIOS is not on here anyway, but they may release new drivers at some point. This has got, oh, this is interesting. This has got the NVIDIA driver on it, but it's got the NVIDIA driver for that machine, which is taking an RTX 3050. But I would have to reinstall a driver like the machines over there, and I'll show you those in just a second because I want to show you my new cases. The machines over there have a 5060 Ti, so I'd have to reinstall the OS. I mean the graphics driver. And those are machines that I build regularly for a client, so I'll probably make a separate master just for that. So okay, so let's see. So that was pretty successful. So yes, Michael Quest, it's Rufus and CloneZilla on a stick, 16 gig, nothing fancy. Ed says, on setting up the General Master, can you update Windows without registering it? Yes. Yes, you can do almost everything with an unregistered copy of Windows. There's some personalization type things that you can't do. For example, this desktop image right here, I will replace it. In fact, let me show you what I'm going to replace it with. Let me throw my drives in here. I've just got a little USB unpowered hub that I load up with all the software that I'm using. And let's go ahead and, yeah, I'm just going to try to personalize this. And I want to personalize it with a new background. And it says you need to activate Windows before you can personalize your PC. So there we go. So let's go ahead and let me just take a second. While I'm here, if you don't mind, I'm going to change the product key. And we'll go ahead and put the product key in. And I know, I'm showing you my product key. How about I just won't show you the last 5 letters or something? How about that? And I'll probably mistype it anyway. And then we'll cover it up for the last few. And can we activate it? Let's see if it'll let me activate. Dun, 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 dun. Windows is activated. Okay. Now I can, let's just get rid of this for a sec. I can come in and personalize, change my background, make the background into a picture, and browse photos. And this is the background that I want. And it basically is just a sort of a textured black background with the vMix logo here in the bottom right. And so the client will receive that, and when they fire it up, that's what they'll see for the very first time. And I may put a little tag across the bottom of, you know, how to get in touch with me if they have a problem, something like that. But yeah. So Dave said I may not need to update the NVIDIA driver. That's interesting. So you'd think a 3050 driver would work on a 5060 Ti? Why do they have different ones then? Okay, Michael says, and the clone will not register the new NIC, etc., as there's too many new hardware, so continue. Well, in this case, Michael, I've made a master clone of the Asus Prime Z890P Wi-Fi motherboard. And so as long as I keep using that motherboard, other than the BIOS update that I have to do on that particular individual motherboard, all the other drivers and everything else are for that motherboard, and they are already installed on here. So if I make a clone on that, that means they're already installed on the new one. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different Asus Z890 Prime P Wi-Fi motherboards. So this is going to work on all those motherboards, and all the drivers will be right. And so, for example, let's go back to this one for just a second. And I'm going to right-click the Start key down here in the bottom left-hand corner, because I've already told the clone in Windows that I want the Windows 11 Start button back here where it's supposed to be. I'm going to right-click that, and I'm going to go to Device Manager. And here's my checker. I have no devices here that have a little warning next to them. So that means all the hardware, all the drivers are installed. And a lot of times you'll have, 5, maybe 10 or 12 of these that are waiting to have a driver installed. And sometimes Windows Update will get the driver for you, but not often. Not often. So I've got vMix here, and we'll pop vMix up. Come on. And it says, "Oh, translations provided by Google Translate." Okay. And it asked me for a registration key, but I haven't activated this guy yet, so there is no key. So essentially, there's nothing I can do in vMix until I get a key to put on that machine. I have for some of the other machines that I'm building regularly for the client. Again, it's the same machine over and over again. I went ahead and made a vMix preset that, since the hardware is all the same, and I made the preset part of the clone so that when I clone it, it'll clone it and produce that preset. So when I activate vMix, fire up the preset, everything will be where I want it to be. And I think I need to check and see if there's a special configuration file that there's a special configuration file I'm using with those PCs. I keep pointing over there and I'll show you those. In fact, I'll show you one right now. This is the top view. Don't pay any attention to how messy my desk is. But you can see the front of the machine is towards the top of the picture. And then, we're looking at it obviously from the top down. It's got three 120 millimeter radiators that go with the water cooling. And then an 850 watt power supply. I think it's got 64 gigs of RAM. I don't remember. I'll have to check the specs on that. And then you can see the GeForce RTX 5060 Ti. There's also a Blackmagic DeckLink Duo 2. That's the 4-port SDI. And then a DeckLink mini monitor. So that's a HDMI SDI output. And that's the way that machine is configured. Nothing real fancy. But one of the things I love about the machine is that it comes with this cover. This is another one that I've got completed and just ready to have the expandable foam put on the inside of it. But that front cover is removable, and in fact, it's made custom. You could have one made custom too, but these are made custom for me. You have to buy, I think, a dozen of them or so to be able to get this custom case. But the bottom left corner, you can see, is kind of a blank spot. And that's where, in some cases, I'm putting my customer's logo there. So I'm an OEM for them. And in other places, I'm putting my logo. And in another case, a customer is going to put their logo. So it's really, really cool. And I'm really, really excited about it. It's a company called Sliger. They're out of Utah. And they will build you a custom case. It's, basically these are rack mount cases. This is the 4U. They do a 1U, a 2U. I don't know if they do a 3U or not, but they definitely do a 4U, which is what I'm using. And they have a portable I guess you would say that they're prototyping right now, which would simply be sort of a mini tower with a handle on top. So when they're done with that, I might take a look at that and see if something like that, it doesn't have a screen or, a keypad or a mouse or anything like that. It's just a PC in a small box with a handle. So, do you hear the rain? I hear the rain. Hadn't rained in forever. So, Otis says he loves this show. Well, you're very sweet. Very sweet. Dave says marketing. Not sure what that was in response to. Let's see. Ed says, at some point, could you show setting preferences for NVIDIA for vMix best performance rather than gaming? Sure, we'll do that right now. I want to show you what I've got on this machine. All right, so let's pull in desktop capture, and that'll allow you to see the desktop. And let's minimize vMix for a second so you can really see the desktop. And down here, I have got NVIDIA installed. By the way, NVIDIA is changing the way they're doing things. They're not installing GeForce Experience anymore. They've called it I think they're calling it the NVIDIA app. So don't be confused on that. So here's the control panel. When you fire it up for the first time, you have to agree to the license. And then I go to Manage 3D Settings, and then down here to Power Management Mode, Prefer Maximum Performance. It comes up with Normal as its option, but I do prefer Maximum Performance. And then I'll click Apply, which of course I can't click right now. And then we'll come into Display Settings, and let me scroll down to Graphics. And typically vMix is not on this list. You have to add a desktop app. So, I'll go in there and find the vMix file. Where's the vMix? There it is. And then find vMix 64, and I'll click add to that, and then I'll come down here and I'll tell GPU preference, which says, originally it says Windows decide. I want to say high performance mode, thank you very much. Then I can X out of that. Actually, I should have stayed there. And then this doesn't have anything, Ed, specifically to do with NVIDIA per se. But let's go to settings, and then I'm going to just do a search here for power. And I'm going to scroll down the list here and go to choose a power plan. And generally, let me swap that one back to balanced. No, well, anyway, it'll have two different settings here, and neither of which are high performance. And so you have to go show, yeah, it generally has balanced and power saving. And it recommends the balance, but we don't care about that. We want high performance. We want horsepower. So generally that high performance one is down here hidden. And yeah, so you have to kind of go in and tip it. And so you've then done that. And let's see, change when the computer sleeps, turn the display off, never put the computer to sleep, never. Those are my standard kind of settings. And there we go. There we go. That is how it works. You can see my mess of a desktop here. And I don't even use my own little background screen. That's all right. I like the different stuff that you see from day to day that Windows pops up there. So Ed, I hope that answers your question. All right, Joe DeMax, vMix clone program is a saint. vMix clone program, didn't know anything about that, got to learn it. All right, Otis says, do save as a regular vMix file or as a bundle with assets? The preset that I'm putting on my client's computer is not including any assets, but it is a preset which includes 4 camera inputs, a stinger, and a replay, and all of those are preset together. And then the client at some point will add their own graphic files and those kinds of things. So I'm just sort of getting the bases set for them. In fact, my stinger says, you know, placeholder stinger, insert your own graphic here. So yeah, so it's trying to make it as easy for the end user to get up and get going without having to learn, you know, without having to learn how to do the initial setup. The initial setup is done. They can just add to it. And then we typically give them, you know, about an hour or so remote assistance to kind of get them up and going with that particular setup. Different things for different clients, obviously. You're welcome, Dave. You're welcome. All right. So that's it. That's cloning. And for you, custom cases. Yeah, cool. Let's end the program here and we'll go into the, what do you call that thing, the post show? Yeah, we'll do the post show. Be right back. All right, there we go. There we go. So Michael says, Joe DeMax's program can help setting all input disk references correctly so that when you start a project on a PC, it helps with all the inputs. Huh, I didn't even know that existed. I'll have to take a look at it. I will have to take a look at it. You're welcome, Otis. And it just depends on what your needs are. You know, for me, I'm with a couple of different customers, I'm cranking out the same PC time after time after time after time. So the idea of just making it as easy as possible really appeals to me. I mean, you know, if I'm, in this case, I'm building 1, 2, 3, 4 PCs for one client. And if it takes an hour and a half to set up each one, that's 6 hours. Or I've already invested an hour and a half and I can set up 4 PCs in, you know, probably 20 minutes, you know, to activate Windows, activate vMix, and update the BIOS on the motherboard. And then, you know, any Windows updates that may have happened between the time I made the clone and the time this one actually gets used. And I'll, you know, a Windows update is always the great thing to do, and it's sort of the last thing I do before a PC goes out the door. So I've got Windows as up to date as it will be. Not quite as important with the graphics driver from NVIDIA or the capture card driver from Blackmagic. Those, in fact, I think Blackmagic's been on, what is it, 14.5 for months and months. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So those are all my secrets. You could go in business with me, or you could buy my company, or you could go in business for yourself. Yeah. The trick, of course, is, you know, like anything else, it's not the behind the scenes stuff that really nobody cares about. It's what it looks like when you're done, and of course, having the customer to begin with. And if you're thinking about getting into this business, I'll tell you, I started live streaming on Facebook July this month in 2013. So it's been, no, 2012. So it's been 13 years. 2012 or 2013? I think it's 2012. So it's been 13 years we've been doing this show. And we are the longest continually running live streaming show about live streaming in the universe that I know of. Nobody's challenged me on it. So there we go. We also have we used to have, back when this stuff just started and people were just desperate for information wherever they could find it, we'd have 200, 300, 400 people watching the show live. And, you know, it wasn't a surprise to get 2,000 or 3,000 people watching it in the end. Some of the videos out there have, you know, 20, 30, 60,000 views, because it was a subject at the time that people really needed to know, and there wasn't a lot of information out there. Today, you can't walk down the internet street without bumping into something about streaming. It's become the gig. So it's a different story. Different story. All right, let's see. What's Michael saying here? Hope your client don't pay per hour and has seen this show. Actually, yeah, the client is very capable of doing all this. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. With all the changes lately in Facebook, can you still use vMix to stream to Facebook? Yes. Yes, you can. I think you have to use the custom RTMP server for Facebook, or if you're just streaming to Facebook, you're probably okay. But if you're streaming somewhere else, like YouTube in this case, I think you have to use custom RTMP server. That was the case for a while. I think it's still the case. Otis has been around since 16, 9 years. There is something wrong with you, my friend. Actually, Otis and I met probably in 2016 at NAB at the Streaming Idiots meetup at Scott Whitney's studio. And he was there, and I think, wasn't your wife there? And didn't she win a prize? Or am I confusing you with a different Otis Granville? Huh. Anyway, it's been a good run. It's been a good run. And it's not done yet. It's not done yet. I don't know if any of you have heard me refer to a gentleman that does live streaming for his church up in Pennsylvania, Rick Miller. I just found out yesterday that he died back in May. He'd gotten some bad news some bad health news back in December or January, and I'd been touching base with him off and on, and got busy, and then said, I need to go find out what happened, and found out that he died. So he was a good guy. I really enjoyed his company, and I'll miss him. So Rick Miller, wherever you are, rest easy. All right, so Michael says, what show does Otis run? Well, we'll have to ask Otis. I'm not sure what show he runs. Otis, what show do you run? What stuff are you live streaming? You doing sports or church or both, or a little bit of this, a little bit of that? Yeah. Let's see, what else have we got going on that we can talk about? I will say I really love this little Hollyland mic. I've worn it home a couple of times. I've worn it into the restroom more than once. I get so used to having it on and not having anything that is attached to me, like a lavalier mic with a body pack. And I've still got my Audio-Technica AT 897s, which I loved, which were great, and they would sit just out of camera reach and gave really, really great audio, but I couldn't walk around in the studio with them. And so having this little guy here, I can go anywhere, or I can just assume, hey, turn vMix on and start talking. And no, I didn't have any audio for the introduction today. So I'll have to go back and edit that out. Anyway, well, I hope you guys got some good stuff. That was thunder. Yes, that was thunder. That was the thunder. But the storm has passed. The thunder's just lingering. Although we're going to have showers off and on the rest of the day. Yep. Well, it was great hanging out with you guys this afternoon. I got to get back to work. These machines won't build themselves. I can't clone all that part of it. Oh, it was 2018. Okay. My wife and I were at NAB 2018. I just live streamed for our church and a few other churches in the Houston area. Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, Eric Tabor, if you're still here, if you're still watching, let's go back to the very beginning. Where is Eric Tabor? He came on early and I didn't see him after that. He's headed for Pensacola. But that was how long ago? Yeah, that was an hour ago. So Pensacola's not far. Eric, if you're listening while you're driving, don't respond. Don't respond. But if you're listening while you're driving, when you get where you're going, shoot me a text, email, Facebook message, whatever. And I'd love to make some time tomorrow and take you to breakfast, take you to lunch, something like that, in Pensacola. It's a great, great place. And you probably have family with you and you're going to the beach, but that's okay. Next trip. All right, guys, I'm going to cruise out of here. But I loved hanging out with you today, of course. Always one of my favorites. And I will catch you next week. We'll have some more exciting stuff next week, for sure.